As a companion to volcanoes and earthquakes, hot springs have become a gift of nature to this archipelago country. Hakone, Izu, Ipu, Akaho, just the Japanese hot spring towns that are familiar to Chinese tourists are too numerous to enumerate. In the 3 years of the epidemic, how many pairs of eyes to see the world have been blocked? Unexpectedly, earlier, a video of a deserted hot spring hotel turned into a haunted house poured cold water on Chinese netizens. Kinyagawa, a traditional hot spring resort in Japan, backed by the World Cultural Heritage Tashaku Shrine and the beautiful Okaneko, is only a 2-hour drive from Tokyo. Decline. Like Kinyagawa, there are still many hot spring villages that were once glorious but are now lonely. Atamai, which has left countless legends, has been a leisure resort for Chinese nobles and celebrities since the Meiji era. After entering the rapid economic development, Atamai's hotel industry has developed rapidly by taking advantage of the wind. A small town with 34,000 people, it received 5.32 million tourists in 1969, but that number decreased to 2.5 million in 2011. In 2020, it will be dubbed a ghost town. The Dago hot springs with the longest history are said to have fascinated Prince Shotoku. During the Meiji Restoration, the west wind spread to the east, and the construction of hot spring villages became popular, leaving beautiful and sad moving stories for the literary world. After entering the 1960s, the Japanese, who are developing rapidly, have played tricks on leisure travel, and hot spring hotels are blooming everywhere. Now, the bubble has burst and the epidemic is gone, but is Japan really getting old? Is Japan hopeless? The answer is negative. Living in the deep mountains, life is on the line, getting up early and working hard every day. Those old hot spring shops that seem to have a strong sense of history and a full cultural atmosphere are actually a difficult test. As a result, when many old hot spring shops are faced with the embarrassment that they are old and have no successors, or their children are unwilling to follow the old road, they can only look at the spring and sigh and close their doors. On the other hand, under the double stimulation of interest rate hikes and inflation, the international economic environment is severe. Japanese domestic financial institutions are also keeping tight on their treasury and strictly controlling loans. It is also difficult for a clever woman to survive without rice. What's more, the new inheritance tax policy implemented on April 1, 2023 has even blocked the last way for the heirs to let the property go unused in order to avoid the inheritance tax. Why don't you hurry up while this old bone is still moving? Strip off the heavy assets like hot spring hotels that are not useful. Selling has become the last way out for the old hot spring An octogenarian old man runs a hot spring hotel in Kansai. Being exhausted, he offered a price of 500 million yen, looking for someone to take over the offer, and waited for 3 years, only waiting for a bargainer who cut the price in half. The old man was overwhelmed and said, "It's okay to sell it to foreigners." Immediately, 5 investment institutions expressed strong interest, and some were even willing to increase their bids. An operator who is engaged in real estate transactions and focuses on hotel resorts, said in an interview with Japanese media that recently, more and more Japanese have entrusted the sale of hot spring hotels under his name. He boldly stated that within 10 years, 40% of the hot spring hotels in Japan belong to foreigners. However, what is intriguing is that in Japanese local societies with deeper traditional culture roots, those operators who sell hot spring hotels to Chinese investors are always secretive and refuse to admit it. There are obviously people rushing to buy it, so what's so shameful about the real money deal? There is a saying that warehouses no etiquette based on facts, and the myth that Japan was once a consumption paradise has an inevitable relationship with the rapid development of the economy and the investment of a large amount of manpower and material resources, which has become the consensus of many people. In the same way, if the repair fee cannot be paid, even if you want to maintain high-quality services, you will naturally be powerless. In the eyes of the Japanese, the older the house, the less valuable it is. Century-year inheritance, traditional old store and long history, these seemingly beautiful labels, when it comes to the real estate transaction market, become the straw that crushes the camel's back. Chinese investors, who are accustomed to the price inversion of new and second-hand housing, are more willing to believe that compared with the advantages and disadvantages of old and new buildings on the ground, unique geographical location, water and soil and other resources are the most valuable. Chinese investors who are willing to buy at a price that is twice the market price have a lot of money, no doubt. As for whether they are stupid, the follow-up business situation has the final say. Japanese nervous. Worried about foreign tourists? In fact, some of the chain resort brands that people are familiar with today are also foreign monks. But as long as they are willing to respect the local customs, rural regulations, and conventions, and are willing to invest in capital repair and operation, it will be beneficial to the original brand owner, the new operator, the local society, and tourists. With a long-term perspective, a multi-win and win-win society is more peaceful and stable. With the transformation of the anti-epidemic policies of many countries, the tourism industry of various countries has ushered in a strong recovery. However, before the arrival of a large number of Chinese tourists, Korean tourists who took the lead in driving the recovery of Japan's tourism industry still failed to get the golden father of the Japanese population. The honorific title, the Japanese still want to leave it to Chinese tourists. The 3-year epidemic seems to have suffocated everyone. During the May 1st Golden Week that just passed, the number of tourists in my country alone reached 274 million. You must know that this number is already higher than that of many countries. The total population is even higher. The grand travels of Chinese tourists have also caught the attention of foreign media, including Japanese media, which are particularly concerned about Chinese tourists. A reporter from Japanese TV, NTV, came to Shanghai Hongqiao Station to record the grand travels of Chinese tourists, and said passionately that this is a moment to re-witness the miracle of population, while a Japanese TV program directly stated that Japan's tourism industry we are also very much looking forward to the arrival of Chinese tourists. It is worth mentioning that Korean tourists were also mentioned in this Japanese TV program, and Chinese and Korean tourists were compared. In view of the current post-epidemic period, there are still problems such as fewer flights abroad and expensive air tickets. In addition, most Chinese tourists this year focus on domestic travel, so that the number of Chinese tourists traveling to Japan has not returned to the previous level. With that kind of traffic, instead, the main foreign tourists to Japan became Koreans. But what is interesting is that the Japanese also showed two different attitudes towards tourists from China and South Korea. The host of this program in Japan said this: with the relaxation of entry epidemic prevention measures, foreign tourists led by South Korea have driven the Japanese tourism industry to resume a strong momentum. However, for the Japanese tourism industry, the next gold master father he and the real man are Chinese tourists with a strong willingness to spend. Screenshots of Japanese TV shows. To put it simply, even though most of the tourists going to Japan are Koreans, these Japanese businesses are still waiting for the arrival of Chinese tourists, and regard Chinese tourists as their golden father and true son. Why do Japanese businesses have such a big difference in attitude towards Chinese and Korean tourists? The main reason lies in the purchasing power of tourists from China and South Korea. An airport duty-free shop clerk in Japan revealed in an interview with this program that the sales of this duty-free shop have recovered to nearly 90% of the sales before the epidemic in Japan. They are still looking forward to the arrival of Chinese customers because of the increasing number of Korean tourists. Shopping habits tend to buy some snacks and Japanese wine, while Chinese tourists like to buy some expensive things, such as high-end cosmetics. The duty-free shop clerk's words: although on the surface he was praising the arrival of Korean tourists for the increase in duty-free shop turnover, but looking at the essence through the phenomenon, the duty-free shop clerk's words did not have another meaning, namely, if foreign tourists, led by Chinese tourists, are currently driving the economic recovery of Japan's tourism industry, the sales of this duty-free shop may not have recovered to 90% as it is now, and it may have already broken the record before the epidemic. Screenshots of Japanese TV shows. The Japanese media also deliberately released the consumption amount of tourists from China and South Korea before the epidemic to compare and show that in 2019, the consumption amount of Korean tourists was about 420 billion Japanese, while the consumption amount of Chinese tourists was more than double that of Korean tourists, exceeding 1.7 trillion yen. Because of this, Japanese businesses still look forward to the arrival of Chinese tourists more than Korean tourists. What's more worth mentioning is that in order to attract Chinese tourists, major Japanese businesses have racked their brains to make preparations, not only launching menus with Chinese characters and Chinese translators, but also specially preparing some menus for Chinese tourists. Interesting itinerary. Speaking of this, I believe everyone can already see that the importance of Chinese tourists to Japan's tourism industry is not comparable to that of Korean tourists. This situation makes people have to think that in order to restore Japan-South Korea relations a while ago, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol went to Japan to flatter him, Not only talking about South Korea and Japan should put aside historical hatred and look forward, but also facing the Japanese sun flag bent his spine. It's a pity that the Japanese don't appreciate Yin Zio's flattery at all. How can they not give South Korea face? The Japanese still don't give South Korea face. From this Japanese TV program, we can see it. Some netizens said that it was the worst time for South Korea to be hacked. Some netizens said that this TV show is completely out of yin and yang, and Korean tourists spend too little money. I don't know how Koreans who think that South Korea is the biggest country in the universe will break their defenses when they see this program in Japan. I am afraid they should shout, "Don't go to Japan again." Yin Zio wants to promote in the end. He was the only one who was moved by the relationship between South Korea and Japan. In the eyes of these Japanese, Yin Zio's flattery was not worth mentioning at all. In fact, in the final analysis, what these Japanese businessmen care about is who can bring them the most benefits, not the flattering Yin Zio, but Chinese tourists. Can you imagine such a scenario? You happily go on a trip, and when you get off the plane, you are given a yellow card. You can't hold this yellow card in your hand, and you have to hang it around your neck. Then, like a criminal, he was pressed to do nucleic acid. Surrounding you, there are a lot of reporters holding cameras and patting you around. This is not a new experience of script killing that keeps pace with the times. But recently, passengers entering South Korea must go through some operations. To be precise, it is the special treatment that Chinese tourists who enter South Korea must experience. Such a double standard, such an insult. No wonder many netizens have complained in recent days. After getting off the plane, Chinese passengers lined up to do nucleic acid tests, and passengers from other countries were all unimpeded. A nucleic acid test costs 80,000 won at your own expense, or more than 400 RMB. It took 4 to 5 hours for the results to come out. You thought this was the end? There, quarantined meals went like this: pickles, sandwiches, right next to the trash can. The place of isolation is like this: a small dark room, a big shop, eating and sleeping on the floor. South Korea's entry policy to China can be said to be the most unfriendly and strictest in the world. These naked discriminations quickly sparked outrage across the internet. Regardless of the purpose of going to Korea, whether it is tourism or school work, none of us can allow our citizens to suffer such insults and double standards. Yesterday, the Chinese embassy in South Korea directly issued a countermeasure. From now on, the issuance of short-term visas for Korean citizens to China will be suspended. The highlighted line below is: when will South Korea stop discriminatory restrictions on us, and when will we see if we need to adjust and lift them? Tough and timely. Domineering and polite. To use an old Chinese saying, it is indecent to come but not to go. We don't bully others, but we never accept that we are being bullied. South Korea gave us a yellow card before, and Japan later gave us a white card. If they dare to insult like this, we dare to counter it. Resolutely oppose those measures that still insist on discriminatory entry restrictions against China in disregard of scientific facts and the actual situation of the epidemic situation in their own country. No matter at any time, no matter what the occasion, respect is always mutual. 2. If we say that the congestion in the last 2 days was caused by South Korea, the recent happiness and respect must have been given by Thailand. On January 9, Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok welcomed the first batch of Chinese passengers after the new Crown Class B and B control. Then, the Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand came, the Minister of Transport came, and the Minister of Tourism and Sports came. There is nothing wrong with it. They are all here to pick up the plane and greet the Chinese passengers in person. The scene was lively and harmonious, and everyone had warm smiles on their faces. He sent me a wreath and felt like a star walking the red carpet. This is the mood and experience you should have when traveling. Someone gave a yellow card, someone handed flowers. Some people say everyone from China goes this way, and some people welcome Chinese people. With such a stark contrast, it is up to each other to judge. Thailand has also expressed its attitude long ago. Entry from all countries is treated equally, and no special epidemic prevention measures will be taken for entry from a certain country. There is also Singapore with the same style and pattern. Its Minister of Health made it clear that no entry restrictions will be imposed on China. Because, among all imported cases and severe cases in Singapore, those who entered from China accounted for only a small part. This is seeking truth from facts. This is equal treatment. This is mutual respect. To be honest, the tourism economy has been depressed for 3 years, and every country is looking forward to the recovery of its own tourism industry. This is the fact, and it is also the purpose that both of you and I know clearly. But if you put Yelang's arrogance first, if the country is small but not inferior, the power is small but not afraid of the strong, the neighbors are insulted by rudeness, and those who are greedy and clumsy, then don't blame others for equal counterattacks. To borrow the words of netizens, if you want to make money, you should have the attitude of wanting to make money. What is even more speechless and frightening is when we are united against discrimination and insult. There is also Li Zong, who is immersed in self-movement and does not want to wake up. We might as well be generous and have the demeanor of a big country. The demeanor of a great country should also be reserved for those who deserve it. It's not the person who obviously made a fool of himself first and accused us of being crazy. Rather than a country that sells miserably and is short-sighted. Not to mention wanton double standards while accusing others of their shameless existence. 3. In an epidemic, we can see clearly not only the monsters and ghosts around us, but also the true faces around the world. Where there is a friendship of mutual respect, there is the shamelessness of arrogance. Where there are narrow-minded countries, there are generous nations. There is a pattern of equality and open doors, but there is selfishness that imposes obstacles in a targeted manner. On the huge and complex stage of the world, we can only truly realize it under the interests and mediation. At critical moments, the only ones who can protect us are ourselves. You were discriminated against and insulted outside, and some country came forward to beat you back aggressively. In times of crisis, the only ones who are willing to help us are ourselves. When the price of new crown drugs in the United States remains high, when counterfeit drugs from India take the opportunity to flow into our market, Ali quietly donated oximeters to more than 600,000 villages across the country. Fosun's 100 million UN Azabudin is saving lives in the rural areas of the central and western regions. Many young people always love to pursue Japanese and Korean culture, and idol heroes from other countries. Looking back, we realize that only we are the ones who are really sparing no effort to protect ourselves. Therefore, when some countries try to deprive us of our dignity and undermine our confidence, the more we have to have our backbone and build our self-confidence. What's more, it needs culture. We have the longest surviving miracle of the Great Wall, an incomparably magnificent palace, and the envy of the whole world for 5,000 years. Want food? We have delicacies from the deep mountains, fireworks in the downtown area, unforgettable memories of home cooking, and thousands of local characteristics. Want a beautiful view? We have the magnificence of the sunset on the Long River, the shock of thousands of miles of ice, the majesty of the side peaks of Hongling, and the joy of small bridges and flowing water. China's 9.6 million square kilometers of scenery, with different beauty in 4 seasons, has accumulated 1,000 years of heritage. And why bother to explore on the small land? Do you have to humiliate yourself and make yourself boring? When the virus invades, what we need to keep is health. When naked discrimination invades, what we must keep is dignity. Once, we were devastated and endured too much injustice. Now, we have the confidence to fight back, not to suffer. The China of today is no longer the China of yesterday. Those who can do things, and those who can speak out speak out. Finally, may our country become more and more tough, and may the people of the country stand up straight and have a strong backbone. Things are impermanent. Yesterday, the news that Li Yuchun revealed that he was seriously ill detonated hot searches. At the age of 38, she voluntarily revealed in an interview that she was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis last year. This is a rheumatic immune disease. Although it is a chronic disease, patients will experience unimaginable pain when the disease occurs. Li Yuchun said that it felt like the entire spine was petrified, unable to move. Even lying down and sleeping has become a luxury. The most serious attack was when she was intensively preparing for the concert. She couldn't even stand up and had to use a wheelchair to get around. Sadly, there is no cure for ankylosing spondylitis. Pain can only be relieved with medical means. In severe cases, it can directly lead to paralysis. Zhang Jiyi, who is often teased by people for her very personal walking posture, is actually also having difficulty walking because of this disease. Only then formed the pace that others seem to be a bit cool. In the medical world, the disease is known as cancer of the undead. At the best age, he suffered from the most difficult disease. Even live in indescribable pain for a lifetime. It took Li Yuchun more than half a year to accept this matter. People are often like this, only when they lose, do they learn to cherish. Only when you lose your health will you understand the meaning of life. Losing is the best teacher in life. What is the use of earning more money without a healthy body? Health is gone, everything returns to zero. 2. Schopenhauer said a very classic sentence. The biggest stupidity of a person is that he will use his body to exchange for something outside his body. I think of the remorse of the employee who was laid off by a big internet company 3 years ago. After working for 5 years, he rarely left work on time. Up to 4,000 hours of overtime. Even when you have a cold and a fever, it is no exception. And he doesn't care about this extremely irregular life, and firmly believes that this is for a better life. Sometimes when I get off work at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I still think about work while lying in bed. At that time, I feel that the house and the car are coming towards me. But what happened? It wasn't long before he was diagnosed with a serious heart attack. Not to mention losing his job, he still faces huge medical expenses in the later stage. Only then did he suddenly realize, looking back, it was the saddest thing to find that these overtime work didn't make much sense. How many of us are still making this mistake? In order to earn more money, for a better life, he would not hesitate to exchange his life for money. But when you run out of energy and your health is gone, only then will you find that money may get you everything, a bigger house, more luxurious food and clothing, and a more luxurious car. But only, can't buy your life back. When Kai Fu Lee was young, he had a point of view. He insists that if he sleeps less than 1 hour a day, he can live 24 times longer than others. Therefore, he sleeps only 4 or 5 hours a day. In order to maintain abundant energy, he can only refresh himself with a lot of coffee every day. Colleagues say that he is an Iron Man. Later, he became famous. But because of the high-intensity work all year round, he contracted cancer. After extremely painful treatment, he barely managed to save his life. The biggest illusion when people are young is that they think that diseases will only happen to others. So recklessly squander your health and waste your time. As everyone knows, your body is not as strong as you imagined. Xiao Shenyang said, the most painful thing in the world is when a person dies and the money is not spent. I used to laugh when I heard it, but now I feel sad when I think about it. In the wealth of a person's life, health is the first one. Money, status, family, and happiness are all the zeros behind. Without one, the following zero is meaningless. In this life, apart from life and death, they are all trivial matters. 3. Yu Wan, a female teacher suffering from cancer at Fudan University, wrote in her book before her death. I didn't know until I got sick that people should base their happiness on sustainable long-term life goals, instead of just looking at short-term fame and fortune. Fame, wealth, power, and love are not without hard work, but none of them can be taken away. Peking University professor Lu Qiuan conducted a survey. The question is, what is the most critical factor in wealth accumulation? The survey results surprised many people. It is good health. Lu Qiuan said that he found that some people had a good life at the beginning. Have a car, a house, and savings. But after a serious illness, he lost his wealth and job. Become poor overnight. Losing your health means losing all the wealth you accumulated in the first half of your life. Busy half life, in the end nothing. So Lu Qiuan said that only health is the overall situation of life. I take it for granted. I always think, we are so busy all our lives, what? The answer I think is very simple. In order to let the family get a better life. In order to be able to give parents the best treatment when the disease strikes. In order for children to be able to live a life trapped by money like us, and have the energy to pursue their dreams. But we all forget that time is cruel and health is rare. Forget that life will not stay because of your nostalgia. There is no long-term company, no matter how good the day is, it will be empty joy. As you once said, any overtime work, too much pressure on yourself, and the need to buy a house or a car are all floating clouds. If you have time, spend good time with your children, and give your parents the money to buy a pair of shoes for the car. Don't try your best to change to a big house, and the small house is warm when you are with the person you love. In fact, we work hard, and we don't ask for much. 3 meals for 2 in 4 seasons, the family is warm, and the fireworks are playing. Money is endless, but the passage of time and health is the sand in the palm of your hand. Can't hold it firmly, can't keep it? Why do you want to sacrifice everything for money and fame? 4. Over the years, we have witnessed too many sudden departures. Li Yong, Zhao Yingjun, Zhou Wei, the founder of Shell, Ding Yun, a Huawei executive. More and more feel the fragility and cruelty of life. Also more and more comprehend the equality of life. No amount of money, no high status, can't be exchanged for a longer stay in the world when the god of death comes. All we can do is cherish and value. Once, Zhou Nanjun had a set of fitness pictures that swiped the entire network. At 86 years old, he is muscular. Take 3 or 4 days a week to exercise. Running, horizontal bars, dumbbells, and pull ups are all here. During the epidemic, some people were shocked by his high-intensity work. In fact, it is inseparable from his healthy body. When it comes to health, we always use busyness to escape. But no matter how busy you are, can you be busier than academician Zhou Nanjun? As long as we are willing, even an after-dinner walk, an early morning run, early to bed and early to rise. Persevere, and your body will also improve. There was a set of very popular comparison pictures on the internet before. You think those insignificant persistence is useless, but after 5 or 10 years, it will be a completely different life. Some people go out by bicycle, some people can only use wheelchairs. Some people wake up in their own beds, others toss and turn in hospital beds. Some people can enjoy the early morning and enjoy nature, but some people can only smell the disinfectant water in the hospital. Don't wait until you lose your health to understand the value of life. Don't wait until you face parting to regret that you haven't worked hard to live. The rest of life is short, please take care of yourself. To make time for all that you cherish, so that you can spend longer with the ones you love and those who love you. Once we got to North Korea, our 2 guides started stopping us from taking pictures. Filming is generally not allowed in places other than tourist attractions. However, sometimes it is okay to pat passers-by. If they find out, at most they will let you delete the photos. Overall, our tour guide is still very friendly. The Chinese level of the 2 tour guides is also very good, and their listening skills are also very good. A few of us from Hunan spoke Mandarin with a strong local accent, and a guy from the northeast couldn't understand it. Our tour guide knew roughly what we were talking about, which made me admire. Our travel itinerary is pre-arranged, and the route will generally not be changed midway. What impressed me the most in North Korea is that the people here work like a sports meeting, and the scene is very spectacular. Whether it is doing farm work in the countryside or moving bricks on a construction site, dozens of people often act together, and red flags are planted all around. On the way from Pyongyang to Kaesong, we saw road construction workers, because there was no mechanical help, all labor was manual. While the workers were working, there were actually women playing drums beside them, and girls waving flagpoles to cheer for the workers. Show program. Such a scene stunned me, it was like a theatrical performance. We spend most of our time in hotels or scenic spots, and we have no contact with local people, and we don't understand Korean, so we can't communicate with them. The hotel we stayed in was on an island on the Daetong River. Usually there were no North Korean people here, and most of them were foreign tourists.